Hi, welcome to Creativity Talks with me, Hazriq Idrus, founder of the Speaking Factory, keynote speaker for creative leadership and communications. People have this misconception that creativity is only meant for the arts. So in these Creativity Talks, we are going to explore how creativity can be applied in many areas such as business, career, and life, and how creativity can help us to be better versions of ourselves. To do this, there will be invited guests who could be everyday people or experts who will share with us their journey and discuss topics such as personal development, personal branding, book publishing, mindset, creative process, and many, many more. I thank you for joining me in this journey where creativity and personal growth collide. Enjoy the episode. Hi, and welcome back to our next episode of the Creativity Talks with me, Hazriq Idrus. And today we have another guest, and this time our guest is a certified virtual facilitator. So we're going to find out more about it and how we can actually use creativity in virtual facilitation. So without much further ado, let's call upon our guest for today, Sabarudin Hashim. Hello there. How are you, man?
Hello, bro. How are you? Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, thanks for accepting our invitation to share.
No problem.
How's it going so far for you?
So far, so good. Everything is getting adjusted to working from home for the past 18 months.
Wow, nice. All right, okay. Let's just let's start our session together. Our session proper. Our topic today is on virtual facilitation, and a lot of people have different understanding, have a different misconception about facilitation. But before that, we want to get to know a little bit about you, lah. Okay, maybe you can share with us because you have been facilitating professionally over the years, and maybe you can share with us how did you start your journey and actually what makes you do what you do.
Okay, thanks for asking, Hazriq. First of all, I got started in facilitation. Actually, the journey was much simpler than that. Back in 1998, I attended training on IT Office Productivity Suite. And I was observing how the trainer did his training, and he was so smooth and efficient in it, effective in it. And at no point in time did I feel bored. So I realized that before I wanted to be a facilitator, I know that I wanted to be a trainer first. All right. So as I dive into the journey, I became a technical trainer. Then years later, I came across people who incorporate facilitative techniques into training as well, and one of that journey brought me to two places actually that was my turning point in life. One was Mind Aid, where we teach children how to remember what they learned better. That's one. So I spent a lot of hours there initially. Just to learn how the trainers do their stuff, how they teach children, how they teach teenagers. And then, of course, some motivational techniques as well. And then later on, I discovered process facilitation, and I learned this from Facilitators Network Singapore. You can look it up if you are interested. And that's where I learned that you can use facilitation or facilitative techniques to help move people or teams from conflict to consensus. And that was a light bulb moment for me, because my job at the time involved a lot of conflict among stakeholders, and I just need to rein them in and to get things going. So that was, in a nutshell, how my journey, the 1 minute version of my journey.
Wow. I like the term you used, from conflict to consensus. I think that really makes a difference, right? From conflict, people fight, into people cut together to achieve something together. Wow, that's what. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Right? And how long was that journey from then until now? How long was it already?
Yeah. If you consider process facilitation, process facilitator, I started as a process facilitator from 2012. As a learning facilitator, I started back in 1999. Oh no, wait! Wow. I got the date wrong. August 1998.
Wow.
Now it's August, right? So it's like what? I should be celebrating now already.
Wow. Yes.
August
Yeah,
next year.
celebrate National Day as well. All right. Oh, you
Yeah.
mentioned process facilitation and learning facilitation. Okay, we'll going deeper on that later on. All right. But before that, let's go to my next question. People have been talking about creativity, and creativity, there's actually a lot of definition, and in this broadcast we want to look at the variety of creativity. And in fact, there's a study in the US. It says that creativity can be applied in at least 7 domains. So let's see. So we want to explore and see whether creativity can be applied in facilitation, which I think it can be applied. But we want to hear from you. What is creativity to you?
Okay. Just to let you know, I'm not looking up Wikipedia right now. It's all coming from layman definition. I promise you see my hands are all up here, not typing, Googling. Okay, so I'll give you creativity in my own words. Creativity is basically the ability to create a massive amount of possibilities based on finite resources. That's my definition. All right. So now these finite resources could be constraints that are already there or constraints that you artificially place on yourself. Right. So let me give an example of what I mean by artificial constraints. I can't recall whether it's called Parkinson's law. Example: if you give someone a task and you don't give them a deadline, right, or you give them a certain deadline, they tend to take the maximum amount of time that's given, stipulated by the deadline, to complete that task, right? But if you give an artificial constraint, let's say come up with a prototype within 5 days, right? Come up with a prototype within 5 days. You will be surprised that what kind of prototype can come up with then in that 5 days, right? So and if that example sounded familiar, it's because that's exactly what's happening in the design thinking arena. At the end of the 4th or 5th day, people who are doing a design sprint are expected to come up with a functional prototype to test the interaction between the solution and the end user, right?
And usually design thinking, definitely the underlying tools or underlying elements of design thinking is definitely creativity. And because of that, we can come up with a lot of ideas. All right. Okay, then later on you mentioned about this process facilitation, learning facilitation. Let's go deeper. Maybe you can share with us what is the difference between learning facilitation, process facilitation, and it is definitely different from speaking and training, right? Maybe you can share with us what are these differences?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the important distinction is that as a process facilitator, you are the expert in the process of getting people together to reach to reach a mutually agreed outcome at the end of the session, or 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road. And as a process facilitator, you remain neutral, right? No matter who's in the room. So an example where process facilitation is involved could be a strategic planning retreat by a company, right? Or a work plan retreat, a visioning exercise, organized by a government ministry, a 3-day future search exercise. That's example of process facilitation. A simple brainstorming exercise in a meeting. That's an example of process facilitation. Right? Now, as a learning facilitator, however, it's slightly different. In fact, it's very different. As a learning facilitator, you what makes the difference is that you are not neutral. You are actually covering. You are trying to pass down content, right? You are trying to educate, and instead of participants, you have a group of learners, right? In process facilitator, you have a group of participants, right? And in a group of educational setting, in adult educational setting, it's a group of learners, right? So that's where learning facilitator is involved, right? Now, a learning facilitator basically employs some of the competencies that you use in process facilitation, like, for example, building rapport, trust building, engaging people, using process tools to make sure that effective learning is taking place, right? How to assess whether learning has taken place, and to make sure that, to put in layman terms, nobody fall asleep during the lesson.
Usually that's one of the challenges you face, right? Okay, so if I could summarize this: process facilitation, you are the expert on the process itself. You are neutral. That means you do not cite any whatever they say. As long as you give them the process, they follow the process, doesn't matter, right? Whereas a learning facilitator, you are expert. You could be the subject matter expert in that learning, right? And that you're
Correct.
actually employing certain facilitation skills to, like what you said, you want to get them to be bored and sleepy in class, all right? So maybe based on
Right.
your past experiences, what are the challenges you face, whether as a process facilitator or learning facilitator?
Wow, there are definitely many challenges. You're asking a question that I can write a book on and give a lecture for one whole day, and still don't get to finish it. Okay, so some challenges that I get with okay, let's talk about process facilitation, where
Hmm.
a group come together and they have an outcome they have a goal to reach, or they are working on a problem they want to overcome. Right now, a lot of times when I work with clients, I have to get clarity on what exactly the problem is, right? So, and sometimes they are not even clear what the problem statement is, what exactly they want to tackle, right? So
Okay.
that's one. And sometimes it's a case of too big a problem, too little time, right? So they need to budget the right amount of time to tackle the right size of a problem, right? It's kind of like the joke that you've heard before. No? How do you eat an elephant? You eat it one piece at a time, right? One bite at a time. But sometimes you're trying to eat a whole elephant in 2 hours. That's an impossible task.
So basically, for that situation, you have to make it bite size. So it could be done over several sessions, I suppose.
Precisely. So it could be a series, and it could be you may have to unpack certain things even before the session take place, like a pre-event survey and all that. Yeah. Now that's just one problem, Hazriq. That's just one challenge. I haven't even touched on the others yet.
So if you could share with us in a typical day, of facilitation session, how would be what would going to be like when you are facilitating it? What can people expect in the facilitation session?
Right, in a facilitated session, right? I'm used to running sessions that are either half days or full days. So you can expect the room setting to be open, and I'm talking about when physical sessions are back, pre-COVID, or later on when all these measures are a thing of the past, right? Yeah. So you can expect such facilitated session to take place in a room that's brightly lit with natural daylight, or at least with all the blinds open. You wouldn't see tables that much. You will see chairs placed around in circles, so that people get full view of who they are talking to and who's present in the room. And you will see groups size of about 5 to 8 per group, so that everyone has a chance to speak, and there is a facilitator in each of those groups. Right. So that's a typical setup of a focus group discussion that I run. And a lot of the focus group discussion that I run are closed door sessions. That means invite only, partly because it involves sensitive policies that the sensitive issues that informs policy making at the parliament or at the government level. However, there are some fun sessions that I get to run, not just all serious ones. Sometimes we do run hackathons as well and all that.
All right. So the outcome for hackathon, what would that be?
Now, interestingly, the hackathons that I run are not centered around, the hackathons sometimes get wrongly associated with just coding or boot camps, people who want to create UX, UI, the next Facebook or the next Twitter. Not really, because some of these hackathons are civic hackathons. That means we are looking to tackle social problems. For example, in countries whereby you have too many mouths to feed and too little help coming in, or the amount of resources are not spread evenly across the country. So then we get stakeholders, NGOs to come in, and then we discuss, okay, how do we settle this problem, right? So we bring the brightest mind, the people in the ecosystem, people who are relevant in solving that problem to come in and put their minds together.
I see. All right. Since we are now still in the physical setting, right, on facilitation, maybe you could share with us what is it like a day of a facilitator, or a day in the life of a professional facilitator? What can we, if we want to be in that situation, what can we expect of us to do that?
Okay. If you were to shadow a facilitator, you would see him checking in 1 hour into the event before the session starts. That means he's probably the first one to check in.
Shadow facilitator.
No, if you were to shadow someone,
to follow. I see. Okay. Yeah.
In other words, well, if you want to be a shadow, also can.
Maybe if I tag you lah, if I tag you, you're facilitating, I'll be following you lah.
Yeah. So basically, if I were to put a strap on the moving camera at my shoulder, what you see is me checking into the venue 1 hour before, setting up the room, making sure all the things are in place, lighting, air conditioning, temperature is all right, not too cold, not too hot, the layout of the rooms. Sometimes these are all done the night before.
Wow.
And then we look at the registration counter, make sure everything is in orderly fashion. People are pre-grouped, so that we don't have a group that has 14 people and one group with only 2 people. So all these things we have to kind of plan for. Then come in right on the dot where registration come in. You got to welcome them. You got to find out whether they know what session they are in for. I've had sessions where people come in, they don't know that they don't know that was not the session that they're supposed to go to. Right?
Oh, really? That how?
Yeah. They got attracted because they saw a buffet line setting up outside. So they was like, okay, maybe this is one of those get-together session. So luckily one of my co-facilitators was there to check, I'm sorry, the bonding session is on the other side. This is a focus group discussion. So things do happen.
So interesting.
Yeah, so that's a typical session, and usually there is a certain structure to a facilitated session. So if you tag along, you will see me go through these various stages. Right? For example, in the beginning, we would have articulated the expectations, what to expect in a session. All right, so that they know what's the goal of today's session and what's the outcome if the outputs of today's session is acted upon. If everybody do what they promised to do at the end of the session, what can they expect in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, depending on the scope of the session, right? So that's expectations out of the way. And of course, we would have to place ground rules because some of these sessions can get very heated. We can have polarized, especially when you're talking about policies that inform issues that inform policy making at the government level. People come in with an axe to grind, or they are already fixated on their own solution, and they are already in a battle mode. So we also need to kind of think of process tools and strategies to make sure that people are productive in debates and not just hitting everybody's point with a hammer. So there are ground rules.
Debate is good, right? Only that we have to control it in that sense. So that's why ground rules came about, huh?
Debate is good because I always believe that some amount of friction is good. You cannot eliminate friction altogether. It's kind of like physics. If you learn physics, or rather, when I learned physics and I did badly in it, but I do remember one thing though. For movement to happen, you need friction. There's no friction, there is no movement, right? So I always tell people that if you find your organization there is no conflict, there's no friction, the absence of conflict doesn't mean a presence of peace. So don't mix up the two things together. So that's something that I always tell people. If you see conflict, don't be too quick to intervene. Let's see what the person has to say, right?
So, I like the term you use. The absence of conflict doesn't mean the presence of
peace.
The presence of peace. Wow, that's a nice term to use.
Another way to, I know we all facilitators likes to tell big analogies, right? Sometimes the best way to describe it is people tend to sweep things under the carpet, and you think the place is clean.
That's a layman, easy to understand, right?
I know, right? I just explained an analogy using an analogy. Like that.
It's true. All right. So just now those were good days in that sense, right? We were actually talking about having physical facilitation sessions, and nowadays things. Exactly, it was just wonderful, easy to connect with people because you see eye to eye in that sense, right? So even if there's a friction, right? In creativity we call it creative friction, right? So with some friction we can come up with something fun out of it and something productive. But the challenge right now is we are now moving slightly different now. We are now a lot ever since last year. We are now moving into a lot of virtual events, a lot of virtual meetings, virtual sessions. What was the experience so far in terms of virtual facilitation? How is it like in this kind of situation?
I would say I'm one of those fortunate few that took on virtual facilitation like duck to water. However, I cannot take the credit for myself. I cannot give myself a pat on the back because it's all by sheer luck. And I tell you why. because when Zoom came out, when this application called Zoom came out back in 2015, I think, I was one of the first few to test it out, more out of curiosity than anything else, because I was so frustrated with Skype. Right? Okay, I'm not going to go into Skype because later my blood pressure go up. But all I want to say is that between 2014 to even until now, I work with distributed teams. I work with distributed workforce, so they are not in a single place. So and there was a point of time where I was helping a startup, a digital marketing agency, where we are located in several parts of Asia, right, Southeast Asia. So the only way to get things done is through virtual meetings, and Zoom happened to be the tool of choice. Because at that time there's not many choices, and Zoom was the only one that was up to scratch, with breakout rooms and all that. So long story short, I find that what was a niche, because really virtual facilitation was a niche, not many people were doing it, especially in Singapore, where you can get to a venue in less than 45 minutes, right? So between firing up your laptop and attending a webinar, you rather attend a webinar down at attend a seminar at Tanjong Pagar, right? And at the same time, grab some food along with it, right? So, so what I realized is that what was niche has now become mainstream, and I found myself bombarded with questions. Hey, Saba, how do I get started with this? Hey, Saba, how do I get started with this? So to the point where I decided, okay, there's too many questions from too many people. How do I make this productive, right? So I got creative. So I created a platform called Meetups that sparked joy, where I brought in workshop facilitator. I'm talking about physical workshop facilitators come together, where we exchange tips and tricks on how to engage audience remotely. Yeah. So at the highest point, we have about 200 participants, because 100 of them didn't turn up. So we're supposed to have 300, right? Then 200 turned up, but they're all still in the mailing list. So we do still get in touch. So interestingly, some of these virtual friends become offline copy friends, I think that's what I call it, copy friends, but Zoom friends to copy friends. So we do meet up once in a while. Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned it, Meetup that spark joy. That's the name of the community.
Group. Yeah.
The group. Can you tell us more on that? So I thought I find it interesting. So is this one situation where, or one platform where people can come together and learn from one another in that sense, right?
Yeah. So the community actually is started off with trainers, coaches, and consultants, and it's something that we all acknowledge, including myself and the community of 200-300 people, is that we are all experts in our respective domains, subject matter experts. But when you introduce virtual facilitation and you try to conduct your lesson, your workshop, your tutorial, or whatever over virtual, you are wearing two hats at the same time. You're wearing the hats of an expert in your domain, but you're also wearing the hat of a learner in virtual facilitation. And these two signals sometimes cross each other, and it causes a lot of confusion and pauses and all that, right? So what we did was, me and a few team members, we put together some of our best practices and just give bite-sized webinar of about 45 minutes. I wouldn't say webinar, it's a virtual meetup. People do get into breakout rooms and chit-chat, crack jokes. It's very casual, but they all learn something. Yeah.
And when usually do these people get together?
We at the height of COVID, doing circuit breaker, because everybody needs to transition to virtual lessons quickly, because if they don't do that fast, their rice bowl will also be affected. So we at the height of it, we ran 2 sessions a month.
2 sessions a month. So every other week.
Yeah. Now we run it every other month, because I think people kind of ease themselves into Zoom. They're more familiar, so less hand holding needed. And but we do keep in touch with the community, because we love the community so much. So once every 2 months, sometimes 3 months, when our schedule get in the way, we do come up and share some the latest, kind of like a state of the union address in a bit, like what's the state of virtual facilitation right now, what's on the horizon, what has changed. Like the tools 6 months ago is now a different set of tools, right? Even the tools itself have evolved. The competition to those tools have also come in. So Zoom is no longer alone, right? Zoom is now fighting against Microsoft Teams, right? And so many other tools. Like you have Webinar Kit, you have Webinar Ninja, you have live webinar, you have a lot of things,
Wow. So these are the different tools. And how do people get hold of that sorry, what do you call it? I think I mentioned earlier, meetup that spark joy downstairs. Okay, this is not downstairs, the Crawley is over here. All right. So why don't you go to lu.ma / meetup that spark joy. Okay. All right. So for those of you up there, if you want to get in touch with Saba and to attend some of his facilitation sessions, you can look out down here. All right. Just type luma / meetup that spark joy. All right.
I know it's a mouthful. Eventually you probably shorten the name, but we want to emphasize that our meetups always spark joy. We won't put you to sleep. That's a promise.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Maybe my next question to you, baby. What is it? What do you think of facilitation as a whole, especially virtual facilitation? Is it an in thing? Is it going? What's the future of it? Is it a must, a skill we need to have or something?
My own feeling about it is that virtual facilitation is here to stay. Whether you are a process facilitator or you are an educational or a learning facilitator, is here to stay. Because what was born out of necessity has slowly evolved to become one of routine. Another day in the office, another day in the virtual office, so to speak. And people have discovered the benefits behind running a session from home. I give you a few examples. Just this week, I had I ran a consulting session where we run through customer journey map, and the members, the stakeholders in the company, a few of them are actually parents, right? So they appreciate the fact that they could attend my session while still keeping an eye out on their children who's in the other side of the room, behind a glass door, of course. And so you have that flexibility whereby you can have a proper meals at home with your loved ones, and then just stand by 10 minutes before and log into your session, instead of in the past you have to commute, grab a cab in downtown, go to the venue. So you have more time, more quality time with what and who that matters, right? So that's how I put it. That's one advantage. The other advantage is that because it's virtual, you have no choice but to make the session visual. So that gives you the opportunity to create, co-create outputs on whiteboards like Miro or Mural, right? Miro.com. You can co-create documents on Google Sheets, right? Instead of a flip chart, you have a Vlip chart. I call it Vlip chart because it's virtual flip chart. Right?
Oh, Vlip chart, VLIP.
Yeah, VLIP. Yeah, I will copyright it later. Remind me.
Oh, virtual flip chart. So the flip from the word flip, and then V is meant for virtual. Wow, that's nice.
Yeah,
flip chart.
Yeah. So what is flip chart? Flip chart is basically a Google Sheets that you kind of partition columns and rows to look like a normal flip chart. But everyone that's been given access to that link can now contribute points to the document.
So instead of facilitator standing in the room with the whiteboard or flip chart behind you, it's now in the middle of the own screen, right? Very, very, very productive. Wow.
I don't even have to hold a marker, so that's a good thing. One of the perks doing things virtually.
True. Yeah. But now that you mentioned that virtual facilitation is here to stay, right? So what do you think? In order to be a successful virtual facilitator, what would be some of the traits that we need to work on or need to have so that we can be a better or somebody with skill or competent virtual facilitator?
Okay. Now the answer may not be a surprise to you, but I would say the skills of a virtual facilitator stems from the skills it's basically an offshoot of the skills of a process facilitator. Meaning, right, you still have to be a lifelong learner, because in facilitation, right, you don't always get it right the first time, right? So if you're going into it, you expect failures, but expect those failures to be temporary, not permanent. That's one. So you have to be a lifelong learner. Now you also have to love listening to people's stories, their struggles, their challenges, their dilemmas, because in those conversations, are usually hidden clues on what makes a person tick, what are their hopes and aspirations, even if you never set out to ask what their hopes and aspirations are. So you have to listen to those cues. And you have to be especially good at reading the room. What do I mean by reading the room? Now, whether it's virtual or physical, you need to be able to look out for non-verbal cues, whereby from there you can sense the energy in the room. Right, this person, is he coming in enthusiastic about the session, or he's coming in very tentative and there's some apprehension on his part? You can see whether which of these can be allies in the session, allies in your processes, or who's there might disrupt the session, right? Who came in with an axe to grind, or who's fixated on a solution and therefore not willing to listen. You also need to look out for telltale signs of who's likely to dominate the conversation, and be prepared to intervene or come in to make sure that the person does not get all the airtime in the conversation, right? So the ability to read the room. And of course, the other thing that I wanted to mention, very important, the fourth one is it is always methodology first, technology second.
Wow.
Right? It's always methodology first. Let me explain a little bit more.
Yeah.
And the think about this acronym that I mentioned, right? ENACT, right? E, expectations. N is norms, participation norms. A is agenda items, which we mentioned about, which I may not have mentioned earlier. C is checkpoints within the session. And T is time bound. That means we time bound everything that we do in a session. Now, sometimes I replace that T with technology if it's a virtual session, right?
Okay.
However, the technology is only serves as an enabler. It's not the be all end all. So usually I have a backup plan. Let's say if Google Sheets go down, right? What would be my next, right? I'll probably zoom out the camera, I'll go back, and you'll probably see a sticky wall behind me. There's a wall behind me that you see. Sometimes I'll zoom in on the wall and there is a sticky wall where I paste post-it notes. People will read out to me, I'll write it down and paste it. So we go back to old school, even though we are on Zoom, right? So, you can call it BCP, right? Contingency planning and all that, right? So the fourth point, I would say, of all the points, the fourth point is very important. It's always take a methodology first approach, so that you become tool agnostic. I know there are some people out there who, for some reason they are like, you must use Miro, you must use Mural, you must use Microsoft Teams, you must use this tool. Now, if you hold a hammer, right, every problem looks like a nail, right? Correct, right? So if you are Thor, all you want to do is just smash the thing, right? You're just asking for the hammer, and then you just keep smashing down the trees, like that the first meetup between Iron Man and Thor. You don't want to do that, right? So I'm tool agnostic because it's always the client first. What is the client comfortable with currently? If they only have Microsoft Teams, then we work with Microsoft Teams. I've ran facilitation sessions with just WhatsApp and email before, believe it or not.
WhatsApp and email, just like that. Wow. So
because WhatsApp has a group conference, right?
Yeah.
And everybody has email, right? So they can basically, you can write an email, send them, and they fill out an answer, they forward to the next person, right? So we have done that before. Now, those are extreme example because the company doesn't allow, has a firewall that blocks Google.
I see.
That's one, and none of them have used Zoom before, right? So we have scenarios like that. At least one of our team members has that scenario before, right? For me, the technical stack, we tend to go as simple as possible that matches the ability of the participants. So sometimes we send a survey out and ask, are you familiar with this presentation tool? Are you familiar with this tool? Are you familiar with this tool? When we see there is a pattern forming, then we select the tool.
So it's a pre-session questionnaire or survey, pre-session survey to find out their learning style or capability. Wow, that's nice. Wow. All right. So there are 4 things to mention. I remember you mentioned about first to be a lifelong learner, in order to be a competent virtual facilitator, which is not far from as a physical facilitator. So lifelong learner, ability to listen, and the L. And then ability to look out, right? To look at the situation I
Read the
put
room.
it as L lah. Yeah, read the room. Yeah, I use another L
Read the
for
room,
me to
yeah.
remember.
Yep.
Yeah, look out and
Yep,
read the room.
yep.
And lastly, methodology comes first. So even like just now, they're not able to use Google. They still can use WhatsApp and email. The methodology is there. Only that the platform is different. Wow,
Yep,
this is such a
yep,
wonderful. Wow, yeah, and I when you put this kind of together, right? It seems that these are actually similar to be a similar traits of being a creative person, because you need to be able
yep,
to adapt to situation, right? So which lead
yep.
us to our final question for today, because that's why
Yep.
I always feel that facilitation and creativity is not far off. In fact, it's sometimes it could complement one another. So
Yep.
because it's very flexibility, very fluid. So for what do you think, Saba? How can we then in order to be flexible facilitator, adaptable facilitator, agile facilitator, because of different situation, what are the ways that we can actually improve our or develop our personal creativity so that we can be a more competent facilitator?
All right. Now, I like that question because I can tell you that that's probably one of the toughest questions I've heard this week.
Oh,
But,
really?
I'm definitely up for the challenge though. Okay. The thing about creativity is this. I think let's talk about creativity a little bit, right? In terms of people who are looking to use creativity at the workplace. Now, if you're a boss, right? If you're a boss, if you're an employer, and you want your staff, your team to explore creative solution, in the initial phase, you need to budget time for it, because creativity is not something you can squeeze out of a tube like a toothpaste, right? You can't pull it out of a head out of thin air. So the initial phase, you have to make time for it, right? That's why you see now design thinking seems to be a very popular course that's taken up by companies, right? But I also want to caution that creativity is design thinking is not a workshop, it's not an event. It is actually a culture. You cannot attend a workshop on creativity today and then business as usual when you go back to the office. It has to be subsumed under your culture, right? So unless the company is successful in incorporating that into their own work culture, they will face challenges with creativity at some point or another. Right. So let me give you an example how you can flex your creative muscles. Now, remember when I told you as a facilitator, we get to move from conflict to consensus. Correct?
Yep, I like that.
Now,
I like that term.
You probably think that that's what I do most of the time, but I would say that's 90% of the time. 10% of the time, I have to move from consensus to conflict.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because
the client has specifically mentioned that they are cruising, right? The team is cruising. That means they are. What was good before has become best practice. What was excellent before has become best practice. So they're looking for the next level challenge, right? So unless you kind of introduce unless you kind of stretch them, they will fall into that comfort zone whereby and that's the reason why people have fire drills from time to time, right? Of course, nobody wants a fire, but you want to be assured that when a fire comes, you are prepared. You know where's the assembly line, right? Hint, it's not the canteen, right? The assembly areas. Yeah, you'll be surprised, Hazriq. Yes, some workplaces, they think the assembly line is the canteen. The canteen operators also running for their life. They won't be there. Okay,
exactly,
So, so coming back to that point, you have to budget some time, all right, to allow creativity to take place. Now, once they have the proper methodology, they are kind of understood what are the conditions for creativity to take place, right? Then you realize that the amount of time needed to come out with creative solutions start to compress, start to shrink. You realize that it has become part of their DNA already, right? So, and some of these tools are not entirely out of people's reach. For example, if you can go to mindtools.com. I don't own the site, right? You go to mindtools.com, there's tools like Scamper, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Scamper. It's basically an acronym, right? I love acronyms, right? I just told you one acronym, which is NAC, right? So Scamper is an example of an acronym that's not by me, which stands for substitute, combine, adapt, modify,
modify.
put to a different use, eliminate or reverse or reduce, right?
Yep.
So that's Camper. So you can use some of these simple guidelines to look at the solution and see whether can you turn this around to work differently. Right? I'll give you a funny story. I've used a funny story that I'm not proud to tell my wife because my wife always make fun of me. I have used a chopping board as a security system for my Windows before. You know the cooking chopping board?
Yes, as a security system.
Yeah, because when I used to rent a place, because at one point of time, because we don't have kids and we have too many rooms, so we decided to rent out our house and then rent out a smaller unit for a year, just to experience a different neighborhood. So we realized too late that the window was not secured. You know, there was like a flailing panel of window. So in the at the spur of the moment, because I'm so used to do this, I don't like. It sometimes comes out naturally for me, right? I look at the hardest material I can find at home that I can detach. So I saw that my wife's chopping board, and the chopping board is made of a very strong plastic mix of material that you even the karate kid cannot break it, you see, because it's not made of wood. So I using some duct tape and all that, I use it to kind of make sure that nobody can open the window. Right? Yeah. So sometimes creativity comes out at the most unexpected time because you have kind of conditioned yourself to think of creative solutions. But so the baseline is nobody is, or at least I like to believe, nobody was born creative. Right? So you have to kind of embrace it, either at the workplace, at home, and then most importantly, you have to have fun at it. Even if the what you thought was creative initially, right? People laugh at it. People, what are you doing? But have fun at those quote unquote failures because you realize that that's your first foray into the realm of creativity. And sometimes in facilitation, I use that creativity. One way where some of my co-facilitators exhibit creativity is where they use an analogy to explain a point. So less words, more visuals, right? Visual metaphor.
Yeah.
Right. I have one peer in a facilitator in the field, right? Who I admire a lot. Her name is June. She's able to translate questions into images very quickly, right? So, right, while I am unpacking a question, she's already engaging the participants with an image, and people can see straight away what she meant, right?
Wow.
Yeah. I have not reached that level yet. I'm not that good yet, right? With the marker. Or crayons and all that. She is. So I always look up to her for how to draw a visual metaphor. So that's an area of creativity. So if you are an artist and a facilitator, you're basically exercising left and right brain at the same time, and that's what my good friend there was able to do. Yeah.
Wow. So in order to develop personal creativity, is all the conditions for the culture, make it the DNA, so that it will then come naturally. Wow. That's a very good advice, and it's applicable to at home, at work, right?
Yeah. In fact, if I were to nail it down to 3 C's, I like the magic rule of 3. Yeah, that's me. Right? So to get into creativity, right, you find the content, understand it, right? There's a lot of literature on creativity. All right, incorporate it into your personal culture, then your team or the organization you belong to, right? And then make a commitment. The 3rd C is make a commitment to practice it and incorporate it in other areas of your work. Expand it beyond your usual, Once you make it a habit, you realize it is really, really fun. I mean, you look at all the creative people. Chances are they have a lot of fun and sometimes too much fun in their daily life.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's just recall back the 3 C's. I find it very, very, very interesting. The first C is
content.
Content. Understand the content first, right? From the content, and then you put it inside your condition, whether at work or at home, depending, and then slowly you commit to that. I like the commitment, because if we can just talk all the way, but there's no commitment, no action, nothing will come about. Wow, thank you, Saba, for that very insightful sharing. I thought it's very amazing. Yeah, I thought, and so I always believe that creativity and facilitation is always something like a brother and sister kind of thing, right? And I think you have nailed it, sharing wonderful insight, and I hope the viewers up there can also learn from all the sharing by Saba. So before we go, let's just go through again, in case you need to contact Saba. You can through LinkedIn, you can look for Saba Hashim. Facebook page, you can look for I am Saba Hashim, and then you can go to Meetup that Spark Joy, where he actually runs his community meetup every other week or every other month, depending, right?
Every other month.
Just every other month. All right. Once again, Saba, thank you for sharing, and I hope that I wish you all the best in your facilitation journey, in your creative and a virtual facilitation journey, and I wish you all the best. All right. So and
Likewise, all the best to you also.
Thank you
Keep
you
on
very
creating.
much. Yes, we will definitely one day we'll definitely work together and come up with more interesting ideas. All right. All right. So for the others out there, feel free to reach out to us. If you have any queries, just drop us a message. And till then, Hazriq Idrus and Saba Hashim wish you all the best, and hopefully to catch up with you in the next round of creativity talks. Till then, see you, and hopefully all the best in your journey. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
If you find this video useful, do like, comment and share so that more people can benefit from this. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, click on the subscribe button below so that you can receive updates of our upcoming videos. Till then, Hazriq Idrus signing off. See you in the next video.